thanks everybody for being out here today for our Friday conversation. We have a legend today. Bubba.
I don't know about a legend, but thank you.
Well, Bubba Page, serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and founder and CEO of Influence.vc. Thanks for being here.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. This is awesome to see some support. And hopefully we can talk about some things you want to talk about. And I can answer questions and share some stories.
Yeah, we'll definitely, we'll open it up for Q&A a little bit longer than normal because I think a lot of people have a lot of questions for you. So we'll talk about entrepreneurship, we'll talk about investing, we'll talk about a lot of things. But I think before we get into it, just tell us about yourself. You know, what makes you tick?
Well, Bubba came because I was a fat baby and the name stuck. So let's just start there. So you're all going to ask, is this your real name? Is it? No, it's not. But I've literally never been called anything but Bubba. There was a 2-year stint when I got home from my mission. I served an LDS or Mormon mission in Brazil. And I came home thinking I had to be an adult. And so my real name is Brant. And I remember telling people in the business world, like, hi, I'm Brant. And it felt so weird and so odd to say that because I'd never been called that. Even on my plaque, it said, like, Elder Bubba Page, right? And so after about 2 years of doing that, there was, my wife would know when somebody called and they'd ask for Brant that it was, like, business related. Or if they called for Bubba, then it was, like, family or friends. And after 2 years, I thought, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm, like, a dual personality. This is not good. So Bubba's here to stay.
That's awesome.
So part of that story, though, I better share. And don't worry, I'm not going to go from like my newborn childhood all the way through. That's not going to happen. So I'll just preface that. But I'm a dad of 8 kids, all from one wife. And I get that question every so often.
Round of applause.
You know, and I grew up, actually born here, grew up in the Bay Area, Walnut Creek, Concord. If anybody's familiar with the East Bay near San Francisco. Walnut Creek, all right. Oh, that's awesome. We got some people here. I loved my upbringing. It was phenomenal. I would not move back today. It is not the same place. And then I moved my senior year to Mesa, Arizona. So I actually spent just 1 year there with my family. My dad got a job there and moved there. So I've got some fun connections in California, the Bay Area, in Arizona, and now being here in Utah for 20 plus years. It's kind of fun to have this kind of connection. And then I came out here for BYU, left on the mission, came home, got married, and never left. And 8 kids later, 4 boys, 4 girls, twins that are 4, all the way up to 14-year-old boy. It is so much fun and pure chaos all at the same time.
Thanks. Speaking of, are you a big BYU sports fan? Coach Pope, come on.
I know. Let's not go there. I don't want to go there.
Hey, happy for him though. Big move.
Come on.
What'd you study at BYU?
I don't even know if it matters. I was a comms major, so communications, and studied business entrepreneurship on the side. I actually got involved in my very first startup as a BYU student. So are there any students here? I don't know how many students we have. Anybody? Okay, cool. I think it's one of the greatest advantages of being, so anybody watching online, being a student and an entrepreneur, everyone wants to help you. Everyone. And if you call an entrepreneur and say, hey, I'm a student, whether it's in high school or college, I'm a student and I'm thinking of this business idea, they will talk to you. If you're outside of college and you start a business and you call somebody and say, hey, I'm starting a business, they're like, no, I don't want you to sell me anything. Right? So any of you that are watching that you're a student, take advantage, dive in right now, use all of the collegiate resources or the high school resources, go win prize money. That's what we did. We ended up winning different competitions at BYU, and we'd get money for free to use in our business. I thought it was awesome. But that experience, it was called Seatability, by the way. Seatability. Classic name. It was office furniture. And I ended up running that with, I wasn't the CEO or founder. I was just part of the original co-founding group. And I sold my ownership to my partners 2 years later. So it was like my first little mini win. Although I didn't get paid for the 2 years that I was there, right? We just like did it all on sweat equity. And I did take a loan from my parents though for $5,000. And I'm sure they never thought that they would see that ever again. But when I sold my ownership, I paid them back plus interest. I was so proud.
Look at that.
And then I was able to put money down a townhome and buy my wife's wedding ring and pay off some school debt.
Yeah, yeah.
Ended up worked out.
That's awesome. While you were at BYU, was there a point early in like, freshman, sophomore year BYU where you're like, I am not going to go work for a company. I am starting my own companies. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. So freshman year, no clue. I thought I was going to go to do MBA, go work at corporate, Fortune 500, and work my way up. I had some sales experience, and I thought that would be kind of my path. While I was on my mission president was an entrepreneur, and I became good friends with him, and he kind of opened my eyes to this concept. So it was after when I came home that I got invited to join that company.
Oh, okay.
And it opened my eyes. I don't really have no siblings or parents were ever an entrepreneur, so I'm the black sheep of my family. I've got doctors and dentists and lawyers, and so they thought I was crazy to get involved in entrepreneurship. But it was like a new world opened up to me.
Yeah.
And I knew that that was part of my calling, like was to do that, go down that route. After the little BYU company, I took a couple years to get some work experience. And I was probably a horrible employee, to be totally honest. But I learned some things. I have to be honest, it's probably 10 or 15 years later, after my one of those jobs, I took the CEO to lunch and apologized for being a poor employee. Because I had since then hired, I don't know, 200 employees.
Performance-based or just because you were
annoying? No,
annoying?
just because I was a punk and thought I knew everything and thought I should be like on the executives table when they were having like owners meetings, and I'm this entry-level employee. So I apologized to him. I was like, look, I was such an idiot.
That's hilarious.
And we just laughed, and
yeah.
we've stayed friends.
So what was the first big move out of school, at the end of school, that really was like the catalyst for what's to come?
2009, so 2008, I went through a program called Junto Partners. So you mentioned legend. Well, I'm definitely not, compared to somebody named Greg Warnock. He's been in the venture capital community for decades and decades. He and his original co-founder was named Alan Hall, and they created an incubator for young entrepreneurs who wanted to become entrepreneurs. And it was an 8-week course. You had to apply. I think they had like 200 people apply, and they picked 20.
Right.
And then you went through this 8 weeks of a rigorous, practical application of entrepreneurship. And it was that trigger for me that really launched me into my next business. Because I ended up getting selected as the top 5, and so I got their personal mentorship and advisement. And that blew my mind. It blew my mind being able to meet and be with them. And they had these, there was no other motivation. They didn't give me money. They weren't invested in me. It was literally just a mentorship advisement opportunity. And it changed my world. And I remember asking Alan Hall, who had sold his company for $250 million. I said, look, the business you built, it seems like that's where my skill sets would parlay the best into. Could I build a mini one of that? And he was like, of course. He didn't care. It's not like I was going to compete.
Right.
And so that's what Launch Leads, that's when I started Launch Leads in 2009. Okay. And bootstrapped it, didn't raise any capital, found my neighbors and like old college roommates to come and work with me.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things was having to fire my college roommate twice, not once, but twice, because he said, oh, come on, let me come back. And I did. And then it wasn't good. It wasn't good. Love him to death if you're watching. Love you. You know who you are.
Still friends, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Maybe.
And then ran that business up until 2014. So Launch Leads is an outsourced, if you've heard of the SDR or sales development reps, business development reps, it's kind of in the
BDR.
Yeah, BDR. It's the B2B tech scene. We created an outsourced version of that. So it was a service-based business. We were profitable right out the gate. And it allowed me to learn business in a unique way without venture capital, without the pressures or the nuances of raising and fundraising. So I always tend to encourage, especially college age or newest entrepreneurs, that service-based companies could be an amazing way to start, to learn business and all the fundamental principles with real money and having to make real profit in order to survive. Because sometimes when you go raise capital, which we'll talk about in a bit, it gives you this false sense of what is truly happening in your business because you got this truckload of cash and you're just spending it. And so you're in the red all day, every day, and you don't realize that you can't do that forever. But running a service-based company, usually you have to be profitable. So anyway, a little recommendation.
Yeah.
I ran that until 2014 when I hired a CEO.
Okay.
And so I still owned it, but I gave the CEO some ownership and then paid him a big old fat salary to take over. And luckily, I was able to keep a salary for myself, but I didn't have to go to work. So I ended up starting a venture-backed technology company called QuotaDeck, which we ended up rebranding to Outro, which I think Outro is on that wall, the wall of fame.
No way.
It's on there.
Go check that.
You'll have to. Whoever can find it. I couldn't find it in the 2 seconds that I had walking in. So if somebody finds it, please tell me so I can take a picture.
QuotaDeck or Outro is on it?
Outro.
Okay.
Yeah, so outro.com. And it was in the same, a similar industry of business to business, sales related, but it was a referral automation platform. So people could refer either sales referrals or hiring referrals by leveraging their LinkedIn and our algorithm and AI in 2014, before AI was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Would figure out who would be the right fits and then automatically make introductions. Anyway, it failed. So long story short, it did not work out like we wanted. 2.5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, raising venture capital from local firms here, Kickstart, Seed Fund, Peterson Ventures. I ended up getting accepted into the Techstars Accelerator program. Have you heard of Y Combinator? Some of you have. So
Yep.
Techstars is kind of the number 2 in the country. So I moved to Boulder for 3.5 months, almost 4, to go through that program. Talk about a challenge. My wife was pregnant with number 4, and she had 3 little kids at home, and I was coming back like every other weekend. Ugh. That was challenging, to say the least. And then the lessons learned on having a business fail or not work out as planned was dramatic. Almost more learnings than the success that I ended up. So when that one didn't work out, luckily the CEO had continued to grow it, and we had achieved the Inc. 5000 list 3 different times because of the fast growth. And I ended up selling it to him in 2020. And he's continued to truck along.
It's still, I was looking at the website earlier.
It's cranking.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was a heaven sent because it was the first week of March and in 2020. I don't know if you guys remember what happened in March of 2020.
Rudy Gobert.
Yeah. So we were an all in-office crew, and all of a sudden had to completely reinvent the business. And I had just got wired the funds, like on a Friday, and COVID shut everything down on Monday.
Ugh.
That's when my twins were born, by the way. So kind of fun.
I'm curious. Talk about the challenge. Maybe it wasn't a challenge and you were perfectly comfortable doing it, but taking that step back, handing the CEO the company, and then going and building QuotaDeck and eventually Outro, what was that trust process like?
It was honestly like the entrepreneurial dream. If you're building a company today, how many entrepreneurs are here in the group? We got some entrepreneurs here. Awesome. How many of you may want to be an entrepreneur at some point? That's great. So pretty much 100% of you at some moment either are an entrepreneur or would like to be one. I think part of the entrepreneurial dream is to be able to build a company that can support your lifestyle with cash flow so that you, and systems and processes and people, so that you don't have to be there every day. Doesn't that sound like the dream? You can go on vacation and your business keeps making you money? Yeah. I know my brother-in-law, I love him to death, but he's a dentist. If his hands are not in somebody's mouth, he is not making money. Now, he makes great money when his hands are in the mouth. But if he wants to go on vacation, he gets nothing, and it actually costs him money because he had to pay for the vacation and not make money, right? So to me, building a sustainable business is to where you don't have to be there every day. And that was my goal. And in 2014, it took me 3 different hires and a full year before I actually found the guy who stuck. So that was painful.
Yeah.
But I had written up essentially a 90, I think it was 90 page, it's been a long time now, Google Docs, a 90-page Google Doc like manual of how to run the business. Because I had started and I did every single job. So I wrote the template and the formats and so that every single position had the exact idea of what to do. Now, of course, they continue to improve things, but I was able to train him with this manual, and he did a phenomenal job. He was a great operator, probably better operator than I was. And so handing off the reins, it was weird to hand over your baby. But I knew because I had given him ownership, and he had to vest that ownership. Have you guys heard of that process? So if you get stock at your company, you usually don't get all of it until you've worked there for 4 or 5 years. So he had to be there for 4 years to vest his equity. So I knew he was incentivized. And I was paying him a big salary with potential bonuses. So, I mean, $300K a year is not bad, right?
Not bad, yeah.
And he did a phenomenal job, and I'm grateful for it because it allowed me to try this new thing. And even though my new thing didn't end up panning out, I think I can look back now, even though it was so painful, I can look back now and I can see God's hand in all of it. Even the business not working out. Even though I felt inspired to start it, I was supposed to go through that.
Right.
And it changed me.
I don't want to get it too nitty gritty, but let's get in the weeds a little bit. I mean, during the low, because entrepreneurship, high, low, right? You knew you had this company that was extremely successful, was still growing quickly. The CEO was doing an incredible job, yet you were emotionally probably just absolutely drained with the failure in front of you. Talk about like, how do you get out of that rut and be able to prepare for what's next?
I'm still learning that. So I can share with you how I'm learning. I cannot share with you guaranteed proven results, right? And I think all of us through our lives, every one of us has to go through hell, no matter what that is. And we're all going to face it. If you haven't faced that level of hell, I hate to say it, but it's coming at some point. Live your life in a positive way. That's the way I think about it. Glass is always half full for me. But at some point, we have to, that's just God's plan, we have to go through hell. And to feel the bitterness and the pain of whatever it is that you have to go through is part of our life. That's how we grow. That's how we stretch ourselves. It's what God wants us to do. Sorry, higher power if you'd like, but I'm going to use the term God. And as I was going through the depths of hell for me during that moment, that was a layer. I've since gone further. But in that layer of what I was learning from a failure of a business, I felt like I personally was the failure. And my investors were incredible because they would talk to me and be like, Bubba, you guys worked your tails off. Like, you are not the failure. The business failed. Who cares? We'll back your next business. We backed you, not necessarily the business.
Right.
And I remember thinking and hearing that from these investors and thinking, oh my gosh, like, are you being serious? Because I had put myself into that business so much that I thought it was me. And the reality was we hooked ourselves to LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn decided to shut us off. They wouldn't let us take their data anymore. Lesson learned, don't build a business that has to be attached to another thing.
Right.
Or if you do, have backup plans. And so there's a lot of other things around it, but like the business didn't pan out. And so as I was going through this, literally my first time in my entire life, I felt what I think is depression, or even what I think is anxieties. I had never really felt that before in my life. And I remember going through it, and there were some experiences on my personal life too that really, really took me down. And it was like I was already down, and then I got kicked while I was already down. And for me, that was my wake-up call, that I had not turned myself to God like I should have. And I don't want to make this like a sermon, you guys. I know I'm talking a lot about it, but like it's a huge part of my life because for me, I started volunteering in the Draper Temple, and I was more dedicated on my studies. And for me, that's what I needed to heal. And even though I didn't even know how to process emotions, and I'm still literally right now learning how to process emotions as deeply as I need them to be, because I don't know about you guys, but I've just shoved emotions down my entire life, right? Something happens, shove it down, move forward. That's what I was taught. Get up, pick yourself back up. I teach my kids, this is funny, I'm now realizing I teach my kids when we fall, we get back up and keep going. That's like a phrase my little 4-year-olds can say.
Yeah.
We're skiing. Hey, they fell down. Hey, what do we do when we fall? We get back up and keep going, That was my whole life. I've always been that, but I didn't realize the importance of processing emotion. And I would recommend to anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, who is to stop shoving it down all the time and learn ways of processing that emotion. And again, I'm just I'm scratching the surface myself of learning this, but I'm only now seeing the value of even looking at childhood learnings and how it's affected my adulthood. And I know I'm getting maybe deeper than other conversations, like from an emotional standpoint, but I'm now recognizing how incredibly important our emotional stability and our ability to process and deal with emotions are, especially as an entrepreneur. Because the more you shove it down, it's going to blow up at some point in your life. Mm-hmm. And it's probably going to be a lot worse when it does. So I highly recommend. Therapy is a good thing. Nobody looks down at therapy anymore. I think it's a good thing. I think books can be incredibly helpful. I just finished a book called Attached.
I was just going to ask, any good books?
Yeah, oh my gosh. There's one called How to Do the Work. She has a phenomenal Instagram following too. How to Do the Work. There's another one called Attached that I just finished. And it teaches you so much about your childhood upbringing and how it affects your adult relationships. Holy cow, I had no idea. And now I'm able to look deeply inside and say, oh my gosh, I think I maybe had some trauma at this age. And you know what? I think maybe had some at this age. And if I can look back now and process it and even talk to my inner self and say, hey, you know what? I think I'll be okay. Yeah. You can stop protecting me now. Can you imagine, like, I've got a little Bubba inside me that loves me so much that little Bubba wants to protect me so badly that when something triggers my emotions, that little Bubba is just gripping on with all force, saying, like, I got you, man, don't worry. And the reality is, I need to tell that little guy, I'm a 40-year-old man now. I'm a dad of 8 kids. I love you, buddy. You've got a space here, but I'm okay. And I can do this. And I know it may sound super woo-woo, but just that little process alone of being able to dive deeper inside and even just talk to myself, and therapy has helped because they are the ones like walking me through this. It has been dramatic, and I'm just like layer by layer removing some of these pain points in my life, but I can see light at the end of the tunnel as I find myself a little bit more through this emotional process.
Yeah.
And I would just highly recommend that if I knew about this stuff 20 years ago, man, could that have changed my life? I don't know if I've fully lived my true potential because I've held myself back because of this little guy in there that's been protecting me so much. And I think all of us have fears and anxieties. If you're wanting to start a business but you haven't, truly ask yourself why. Why haven't you? And because there's fear. You've got a little guy or girl in there that's telling you, don't do it. Don't do it. You might fail. And the reality is, you might. And most entrepreneurs, they do. Mm-hmm. But they do pick themselves back up and they try it again and keep going. So maybe that was a tangent, but it just feels, I'm so passionate about it right now because it's so literally alive in my mind right now. I feel like I should share that because it is something I wish I was told a long time ago.
No, thank you. Seriously. I mean, getting raw like that, it means so much. Thank you, seriously.
I appreciate that.
So fast forward, 2023, last year, you jump head in with Influence.vc.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, I'll share just a little bit before that because it parlays in. So after that company didn't pan out, I ended up doing kind of my reawakening. I feel like I literally had a rebirth. And it's what I needed. I became a prepper for like 6 months, just to be honest. Full-blown prepper. Like,
you got the overland vehicle.
Oh my gosh, I literally did. I don't know if you knew this, but you maybe looked at my history. I had a 6x6 Army truck.
Oh man.
Don't worry, I've sold it. I know it was probably overboard. Sold it since then. But like, I just totally felt the desire, and it was one of the most revelatory experiences I had since my mission. I knew exactly what I needed to get for my family, and I would talk to my guy upstairs, and it was like I was getting direct instruction of what I needed for my family, and it was incredible. And so I did this thing for 6 months, and at the end of the 6 months, I felt this peace of like, hey, you know what? You did it. You listened. You did it. Good job. And then I'm like, well, what else am I? What? Because I had taken some time off. I had still had the paycheck from my old company, so our family was taken care of. And my wife was building her business at the time. Mm-hmm. And she had been doing blogging and then started doing Instagram. And it was her and an assistant. And she had a loyal following. And we discussed about working together. And I look back now, and there were some incredible experiences working together and incredibly hard experiences working together. So if any of you work together with your spouse, pros and cons. And I'm not going to tell you yes or no to do it or not do it. That's your own individual experience. We ended up 4.5 years later deciding it wasn't the best experience for us to work together. And so that was about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
And although we had built something during those 4.5 years, that is incredible. She's got a couple million followers across all of her platforms on YouTube and Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we were able to build products. And she was the creative. She came up with all of the ideas. She was the one communicating with her audience and built this loyal group on social. And I just helped to hire and train and build processes and systems and make sure we were profitable. And it was an awesome experience until it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And when it wasn't, it was time. And so we ended up parting ways, and I, again, took some time off. I had spent quite a bit of time doing some angel investing in 2015 up until today. Angel investing is when you invest in a startup with your own personal capital, and you get equity. Mini Shark Tank. You can kind of think about it that way if you haven't heard of it before. And I loved it because I could invest in an entrepreneur that I was passionate about backing. I could involve myself in their business as an advisor or help. And but I didn't have to be there every day.
Right.
So I was hands off. They were in charge, but I had some incentive because I put money into it. And because I had sold the business and because we had been frugal and made some good real estate investments and things like that, it ended up working out that angel investing was a thing. And then I started getting a lot of my friends that would say, dude, why didn't you tell me about Gab Wireless? Because I was, one of the earliest investors in Gab. Why didn't you tell me? I would have done it with you. Because obviously now it looks great because they're worth 20 times what I invested it at, right?
Yeah.
And so I had enough people telling me, like, why didn't you tell me? And they were encouraging me to start a venture capital fund.
Okay.
And so Influence.vc is what I'm doing today. And it's a syndicate. The difference between a fund and a syndicate is usually fund, you collect a bunch of money, and then you make investments from that. And the investors don't get to choose which investments that the fund does. A syndicate is a deal-by-deal investment structure, and I just take the deal I'm going to invest in, and I share the opportunity with my connections, my network, and they can also write a check along with me in one larger check. So we typically get better deal flow, meaning better opportunities. Instead of me writing a 25 or 50K check into a company, we're writing a $500,000 check into a company. Mm-hmm. And so we get a lot more opportunities to play at the table than just maybe an angel would.
Sure.
And then the investors, if you were a part of this syndicate, you get to pick which businesses you want to be involved in instead of just hoping and praying that the fund picks the right ones and you're a part of. Now, I'm a part of 5 different funds. And so they're taking my money and they're investing it and I don't get to pick. But for me, I felt like today it was the right way to use what's the syndicate model.
Yeah.
And any of you are welcome to join. You can see what my deal flow looks like. Every month I send out deals, and those that choose to invest, they just respond and say, I'm interested. I love that deal. Mm-hmm. And our most recent deal, you've probably seen their billboards, Pura. We did a deal with Pura, and they're one of the fastest growing companies in Utah.
By the way, I love the signs on I-15. The fastest growing startup is a fragrance company, I think is what it says. I think it's hilarious.
I think they've got a lot of room to grow, and so we were able to get a deal there. So I pooled my group together, and we did a deal with Pura. I've got another deal I'm doing right now. So anyway, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd highly recommend if you're on LinkedIn, hit me up there. There's only so many Bubbas. Bubba Page. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're an Instagrammer, I tend to post a lot on Instagram, mostly about my family and some business stuff. So feel free to be on Instagram too. But Influence.vc is what I'm doing today, and I absolutely love being able to invest and then leverage the experience that I brought from working with my wife in the social media world with influencers as both an influencer and as a business paying or working with influencers. Mm-hmm. So having that duality of knowing both sides. To date, I go to my investments, my portfolio companies, and I can just help advise them on how to build a system that may help them grow faster through influencers.
Yeah. And real quick, before we jump to Q&A, because we want to make sure to have time for that, talk about that. How are companies and how should companies be using these influencer strategies? And how are you helping do that?
So I did a reel on this. Actually, it was a podcast. So if you follow me on whatever, you can probably get more detailed because it's like 45 minutes on it. But I would suggest if you're an early stage startup to not pay sponsorships. The only reason for that is you just don't know who is going to perform or who won't. And unfortunately, what it's going to do is limit you because most influencers will not do it unless they're getting a sponsorship. And I understand because they want a guaranteed payout. I get it. They're doing the work. Right. But if you can find people who are willing to do an affiliate program where they sell whatever your product or service is and they get a commission based on that performance, then it's 100% more in your favor as a business because you only pay out when they perform, if that makes sense. So I would highly recommend using more of a referral or an affiliate program instead of sponsorship, just until you kind of understand what type of influencers is the right group to work with, how is the right approach, how does your audience feel about it. And once you've proven that method, then go ahead and sponsor because you know with more certainty that you'll get an ROI.
Yeah.
And then if your business has any level of consumer nature to it, you probably should be on social media of some kind because people are looking and they are getting business from social media. I'm not saying that should be your sole source of business. Diversify, but it definitely should be a component of it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Let's open it up to the audience.
Thanks. I have 3 questions, but they
boy.
all layer into each other, so they're going to be stacked very easily for you. First, on the companies that you invest in, what is your thesis behind that? Second, what does your due diligence look like, and then specifically your financial due diligence?
Yeah. So because I'm investing in seed, pre-seed, sometimes Series A companies, it's mostly very early stage. I'll answer your last question first. Financially, they usually don't have a ton. I personally like to invest in a post-revenue company. That means they do have revenue because there's a lot that are pre-revenue that I see, and I have funded some of those. But post-revenue is more ideal because when I do bring the influencer strategies to them, they can actually implement it. Whereas if they're pre-revenue and they're not selling something yet, I'm not as useful. My check is kind of like everybody else's check. It's just money. But if they are ready to implement kind of the influencer, then I can be a strategic advisor. What I'm looking for, I love second or repeat entrepreneurs. I know that sucks for anybody who hasn't done a business yet because you're like, well, what about me? This is my first time. I have funded first-time entrepreneurs, but I prefer repeat entrepreneurs because you learn a crap ton from your first business. And so I know I have less risk when you are a repeat and have had some level of success already. So that's, and so people, number one, that's what I look at investing in first is the person. So if you don't know me or you're not connected through a relationship, you're most likely not going to get your pitch deck through to me. Because I have so many people who do know me or who are referring me their friends or their people that they trust. That's who I go to first. And I believe this is how almost all venture capitalists work. It's a relationship game. And I know some of you might be thinking, especially watching, you're like, well, I don't have those relationships. And I'm saying, well, go build them. It's a long game. Venture capital is not a get-rich-quick game. You're in it for years and decades. As an entrepreneur, you have to play the long game. I know when I write a check, I'm not going to get a return for 5 to 10 years. And I am married to that entrepreneur for 5 to 10 years until I get a payout. So this is a long-term relationship. This is not some one-night stand, right? And so I look at the relationship is very, very critical. And I want to know their background, and I want to know their friends. I want to know who they've worked with. So for me, a lot of the due diligence is purely people-based. Then I want to make sure they have a business that has a big enough market to be venture-backed. Because if you are, no offense here, I'm going to use the catering example. A lot of the catering examples, he is going to crush it because his barbecue is fantastic today. In this Utah market, he's going to blast it out of the park. But it may be very difficult for him to go worldwide with that. Whereas a tech company may be a little bit easier because you can build a scalable product that anybody can pay on a monthly basis, a subscription like Stripe. Anyone in the world can use Stripe. So I know their market is ginormous. And so there's something about having a big enough market that's kind of my number two. And so people first, market second. And then, of course, I want to look at traction and I want to look at their product. I want to make sure there's a good user experience because you can have the absolute best idea in the world. You can even have the best IP, meaning you can have the best patents in the world. But if you create a product that doesn't have a good user experience, you'll fall flat. So many examples out there of companies who spent millions and millions and millions of dollars that they raised from VC only to build a product that nobody really wants. And so I think there's an iterative process. If you haven't heard of the book Lean Startup, I know it's old school, but I'm old now, so I can say Lean Startup is another book I would highly recommend to any of you that are going about your business. It teaches you primarily to build business in a lean startup way, which is first with an MVP, a minimum viable product. So instead of building a Ferrari immediately and spending millions of dollars building that Ferrari, why don't you go build a scooter, and not even an electric scooter that you have to push.
A razor scooter.
A razor scooter. But it gets you from point A to point B, and you can use the product from point A to point B. And you know what? The user experience is, hey, it works. Because if you build a Ferrari first, you have to build the axles and the frames, and you got to get the motors and the tires and put it all together. And you've just spent all this time and energy and money, and you don't even know if your Ferrari is what people would want. And so I would highly recommend a book like Lean Startup to really teach you those fundamental principles. And if you're a first-time entrepreneur, if you come to an investor meeting and say, this has been my process to get to this point. I built a scooter, and then I built a skateboard, and then I built a bicycle, but all of these little iterations got me from point A to point B, but I'm getting better. And when my customers give me feedback, I build it even better. And look at this, now I can scale even faster. Now I've got an electric scooter. And now I'm doing a dirt bike, or I've got, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Building it in an iterative process, I think will guarantee a higher level of success than if you try to build the big thing all at once. Do you follow? Is this a concept that makes sense? Sorry, I spent a lot of time on that, but it's helpful. Okay, did I answer your questions? I think I did. Okay, next. I know we're running out of time. Sorry, guys.
All good.
Long-winded.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your words earlier about what we need to do to unblock and move forward to find our higher calling and purpose. And I was in Seattle for many years. No one ever talked like that. And kind of building on that, I was wondering if you could just speak to how to maybe launch something off the ground. It's your passion project. For me, and I was actually speaking with a gentleman earlier for just half a minute, working with at-risk teens, and I'm actually really, really interested in something that could help mobility patients at a fraction of the cost. It's almost like we were interested in a nonprofit. I'm deeply, deeply passionate after terrible accident in my family and seeing this need and seeing how it could be done with present technology that didn't exist a few years ago. But I've really struggled with how to position this since I don't see it bringing in tons of revenue. And if it did, we still would want to just reduce and create access. So it's not this brilliant technological innovation. It's filling a need in the community and in the market. But yeah, for people who like, I see this need, I want to do this, this could help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah. How do you get people excited about that?
I think it's great to have an idea that is going to help humanity. I think we should all have some level of deep down desire. For me, the key word for me is self-reliance. My mission, if it is that I feel like in my life, is I am here to teach self-reliance. And I believe I'm here to teach it through entrepreneurship as one core piece. Obviously, God and entrepreneurship. Because I think if you can become self-reliant, then you're able to, once you're self-reliant, you can help others. And you can help others along the way as well. When you have a concept that maybe feels like more of a nonprofit, I get pitched by nonprofits all the time for donations. And one of the questions I'd love to ask is, how are you as a nonprofit generating revenue? And most of them are like, what? We generate revenue by asking you for money. I'm like, no. How can you think entrepreneurially about this? How can you be an entrepreneur at the heart and use those proceeds to fund all of your greatest ambitions? Because there's different ways of going about it. When you have to beg for money every single year, and I was literally at an event last night, 25-year anniversary of this incredible organization, Academy for Creating Enterprises. They literally, I'm just going to share with you, 30,000 people a month go to their meetings to learn about entrepreneurship across the globe. It is unbelievable what they're doing, helping build self-reliance through entrepreneurship. So I'm passionate about what they're doing. But I'm also frustrated that for 25 years, they've only functioned off of donations. And they have, and they've done an amazing job, and they've grown and scaled. And I look at that and I say, how can you create a sustainable, not just donation model? So I challenge you, and any of you have more of an altruistic idea or maybe a nonprofit idea, how can you create a business out of it and leverage the profit of that business to go do that thing and change the world? Because it is possible, and you may have to think way outside the box to be able to get to that point. But if you're helping with mobility and you want to just drive costs down to help spread the love, you can do that still profitably without requiring just donations. Because it isn't, in my mind, it is not a business until you're able to generate profit. Now, obviously, venture-backed companies who have done amazing things without profit, it's because they're building towards that profit. Otherwise, they still can't, get a valuation they need. So profit is really a key. But I would challenge anybody with that positive mindset, really think creatively how to create real revenue and generate real profits, and then leverage that. That's a passion for mine, for sure.
Time for one or two more?
One or two more. Let's do it.
Honestly, I'm in kind of the same space that she is, a little bit of the same space that she is. So layering off of that, one of the things that I see when you talk about entrepreneurism is that there are what I would say two basic camps, where you have some entrepreneurs who are very good at systems and operations and some who are passionate about whatever it is that they're doing. In your experience with the people that you've dealt with, what would you say is sort of the ratio of people who succeed in one of those camps versus the other, and how would you advise somebody to move from one of those camps to the other?
All right, so first thing first, write down the E-Myth. The E-Myth is one of the oldest long-standing books on entrepreneurship, and it is fundamental principles. Because it will answer this question for you. So everybody write that down. If you haven't read it, read it. E-Myth. Michael Roberts, I believe, is the author. And he talks about there being different types of entrepreneurs, just like you suggested. And the reality is, if you look at the top 100 success stories here in Utah, you can't pinpoint a specific type of individual. They're all across the board. But they did have drive, and they were willing to probably work harder than most other people. But whether they were operationally minded or passion minded, there is no one that makes you a better entrepreneur. But what I would really recommend is when you read that book is you determine which one you are and know that can be used to your strength, but you better surround yourself with the people who fulfill the other pieces. I know for me, I am not an ops person. I am not a detailed operational executive. I always hire an operations person or an incredible executive assistant, which, by the way, I'm hiring. And so spread the word. Executive assistant right now. But for me, I need somebody who's detail oriented, who can take a look at my massive list of tasks and make sure that I'm doing the priorities first. I'm pretty good at it, but I could always be better. So knowing which one you are and being okay with which one you are, that's the most important piece, is knowing that you can't do it all and surrounding yourself with incredible people to help you build. That's how I would look at it. But read the book, because it goes into way more detail. All right, what's another one we got in the back?
So it's not much a question, but I connected when you said your emotional intelligence and your ability to cope through the downtimes. Because anybody who is an entrepreneur knows you're going to have some harsh downtimes, but if you're able to work through your emotions and be the same leader you are that you're trying to aim for, I think that's huge for an entrepreneur, because you have to be able to manage those emotions.
I love that. Thank you. I think there's a terminology people use. It's called servant leadership sometimes. And there's pros and cons with servant leadership, but I think there's an interesting way about when you do build a team, you need to make sure that you are willing to do whatever the job is, and that you're not too high and mighty to do whatever that is, right? That you're willing, and if you haven't done it already, that you should understand what that job is. To be able to lead the team and for them to be able to trust that you know what you're talking about. I feel like it's, again, there's some cons to that process, and not everybody is fit for that type of role, but that could be a helpful thing, especially as you're going through the traumas of not having payroll. You can't make payroll. I've been in the fetal position before, right? And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I've got 3 days. Payroll is due. I know I'm not taking a paycheck, but how am I going to make it? And then grace of God, literally pay my tithing, whatever it was, a check would magically appear. We never once missed payroll in 11 years of growing that business. That was just straight up from God. Like, I don't know how that happened, but I think there's a level of coping and trusting and faith. And sometimes businesses don't pan out. And you know what? I can look back now and say, I can see that this was something I was supposed to go through. I was supposed to go through it. No matter how horrible it was going through it at the time, I was meant to have that experience in this life. And I know I have a whole bunch of more of those ahead of me. And sometimes it's hard to stay positive when you know that there's all these challenges that are coming. But know that you've got a higher purpose. You've got a greater purpose. And whether that business or attempt or that new job you were trying to get didn't pan out, that there's a plan. There's a plan for you specifically and what you are supposed to go through that really only the big man upstairs knows. And it's up to us to try and trust and do our best to be good to other people, to be trustworthy, to be honest, to treat people with respect, because those relationships will last, I believe, beyond this lifetime.
Yeah. Thank you, Bubba. Thank you for being here. And thanks, everybody, for being here today. Last thing, real quick, LinkedIn, the best way for everybody to connect with you?
LinkedIn is definitely the best. Please connect with me on there. That'd be awesome. I am horrible at email, hence the need for that assistant. So if you email me, I'm so sorry if I don't respond for a long time.
But hey, that new executive assistant might.
There we go. So anyway, yeah, that'd be great. So yes, LinkedIn is great. Instagram's awesome, but happy to connect and help as much as I can.
Hey, and we're excited to see Influence.vc help some companies scale here in Utah. So cheers.
Thanks for coming, guys.